Hi, my name's Alan Kleinhans and welcome to this webinar. Thank you for tuning in. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to join me on this webinar. This information has the ability to change your life and I'm excited to share it with you. For the last 29 years, I've been studying personal development. That initial quest to understand myself has led me to many different disciplines and philosophies and teachings, many different teachers, many different mentors along the way. And through my own process of accumulating knowledge, processing knowledge, using this knowledge to shift my own life and to turn my own adversity into gifts, I've discovered a great process, a simple 3-step formula that can help you do exactly the same thing. Human beings are essentially the same wherever we go. We have the same fears, the same ambitions. And so how do we get out of our own way and become the people that we were destined to be? Become the leaders that we are destined to be. Become people who manifest their greatest dreams at the highest level. A simple 3-step formula that will help you to understand yourself at a much deeper level. Help you to understand your frustrations. Help you to understand where your fears come from initially. And then more importantly, how you can get out of your own way and create the life that you dream about. Create a life that you love and one that you live powerfully. So, my name is Alan Kleinhans and I grew up in South Africa. And for the last 27 years, I've been living in different countries, for the most part, England. And my initial quest for more knowledge led me to England at a young age of 23 years of age. Prior to that, as I said, I grew up in South Africa and I wasn't an academic student. I wasn't very good at school. My education really started at 21 years of age. At 21 years of age, someone put a book in my hand and said, "You must read this book. It will change your life." I took that person at his word. I read that book cover to cover 3 times in the space of 6 weeks. And I knew that I'd found a treasure chest of information that would definitely change my life if I applied it. That book was Think and Grow Rich. And that is 29 years ago that I first read that book. Between now and 29 years ago when I first was handed that book, I've read many books on this path. I've studied many different disciplines, many philosophies, all with the same quest in mind. How can I find out more about myself? How can I unleash more of my own potential? More importantly, how can I become successful and become somebody that I appreciate, somebody that I feel, that somebody with self-respect, somebody with happiness and the ability to live my life on my terms. And essentially, that's what we all want to do. Success is a relative term. It's different for everybody. It's subjective. Think about it. Your definition of success is probably different to the definition of success of other people in your family, your friends, the people that you love, the people you work with. We've all got our own definition of success, our own subjective term in terms of success. What is it to us? Where does that come from? Who gives us this idea of success? More importantly, if we all have these dreams and we all have this idea of success in our own mind and we all have this ideal life we'd like to live and we have these goals and these reasons for having these goals, then what prevents us from living these dreams? If we've all got dreams, we've all got goals, and we all know what success looks like for ourselves personally, then what stops us from living our dreams and achieving the success that we yearn for day in, day out? If you consider that 3% of the human race really lives their dreams, there's only 3% of the human race will actually live their dreams, live life on their terms, free, full of choice, the freedom to do what they want, when they want to do it, with who they want to do it with. Then you got 97% of the planet, the rest of the population, that really lives their life in survival mode. Frustrated, angry, depressed, overwhelmed, stressed, feel in a state of fear on a daily basis. How come 97% of the human race struggles to live the life of their dreams and yet 3% lives their dreams? What's the difference? They're all human beings. They're essentially the same. People are people. And yet you've got 3% of people who actually have found the secret to success. The difference is, my friends, is how they process information. I've discovered over 29 years of studying that 3% of the human race lives their dreams because they process information differently. What do I mean by that? Well, consider that we all grew up in the same way. We all are reared in the same way when we're young. We're born and our mothers, our parents, they rear us. And those first several years of our life, what we don't understand is that the early years of our life, the formative years, we have no ability to reason with the world around us. In other words, we have no ability to reason the events and the circumstances that are unfolding around us. So because we are learning only by association in those first 6 years of our life, we tend to create false definitions of reality. And false definitions of reality simply mean that we have only allowed ourselves to look at one small aspect of what has unfolded, and then we place a definition of that on that aspect. And what we do then is we delete and distort and generalize. And we learn to do this. And then we continue to do this as we get older. At around the age of 7, we begin to reason for the first time. We begin to use the reasoning faculty of our brain for the first time. Now we can start to reason with what's happening around us. And as we get older, we learn to reason more effectively. And that's what school, college, and university teaches us to do. So that when we get into the wide world, we can become effective adults and we can achieve, or so we're told. However, if you consider that 97% of the human race is struggling to achieve their dreams, struggling to pay the bills, struggling to make ends meet, struggling to feed their family, then what is the difference? As I said, it's the way we process information. If you consider that we have events that take place in our life when we're youngsters, I call them significant emotional events, which is a psychological term really. A significant emotional event means that something impacted you significantly at a deep emotional level. If you consider the first 6 years of your life when you have no ability to reason and all you're doing is you're learning by association, a child puts his hand on a hot plate, it burns. A child learns that you don't put your hand on a hot plate. However, the next day the same plate is cold, and yet the child will avoid that plate because it thinks that plate is hot. That's association. And one of the greatest lies that we ever get told or that we ever learn to tell ourselves is that love leaves. And because we are basically hooked on love, we crave love, we are love, at our essence we are love, and yet we learn early on as youngsters that love leaves. What do I mean by that? Well, let me paint a scenario for you. Imagine you're in your crib, you're a baby, you're about 12 months or even 18 months. You're in your crib, you're playing with your blocks, and you hear a noise at the door. And you look up, and there you see your mother walking towards you. Immediately you start smiling, you grab the top of the crib, you pull yourself up onto your legs, your little wobbly legs, and your mother's coming towards you, and you know that her hands are out, and what that means is she's going to pick you up. By association, you've learned that whenever she puts her hands out, she's going to pick you up, and she's going to pull you close to her bosom and hold you close, and you love that because you are a baby, and you love it when she holds you close, and you get that feeling of love and that oxytocin that connects you and your mother at a deep level. And now something happens. As she arrives, she stops, she pauses, she turns around and she walks away. And you are left confused. Your face changes from a big smile to a frown, and you fall on your bum in your crib and you begin to cry. You can't understand why your mother turned around and did not pick you up and walked out of the room. You have no idea of understanding perhaps that the doorbell rang and she was interrupted. Or perhaps the cooking was on, or maybe she heard the kettle, or the phone rang. You have no idea that this may have happened because you are learning by association. All you know is that your mother didn't pick you up. Something happened. And over a period of time, you start learning that love leaves. Sometimes love comes and sometimes it leaves. And so you can't really understand this, and you're learning by association. And then you start getting a little bit older. You're 2, you're 3, you're 4, and you start being scolded for the first time perhaps. Perhaps you get scolded in public, or maybe you touch something you shouldn't have touched, or you break something by accident, or you're making a noise in a supermarket. One of the most common scenarios where mothers find themselves with their young children, and a young child starts playing up, wants something off a shelf, the mother says no, the child is indignant, the mother is indignant, and before you know it, they lock horns, and now the child is throwing a tantrum, and the mother starts scolding the young child. Now, is that the child's fault? No. The child is just expressing itself. It's just expressing its energy. It's having fun. That's what children do. They touch things, they pick things up, they put things in their mouth, they want things, because it's the visual image that stimulates their brain, and they want to pick things up, and they exploring the world around them. As adults, as parents, we've got our own rules for that. We find ourselves in public places with our children, and we don't want them to do certain things because it doesn't fit with the rules that we have for public places. So what we do is we slowly begin to enforce our rules on these young kids, and they begin to define the world around them. And these false definitions, the way they define the world around them, becomes a false assumption about how the world works. And that false assumption or that false premise begins to form the basis of your psychology. This happens to every single one of us. It's no wonder that by the time you're 7, developmental psychology concludes that by the time you're 7, you've already formed your paradigm almost completely. And your paradigm is formed of a collection of beliefs. So that means by the time you're 7, you've already formed your psychology about the world around you. You've already decided who you are going to be and what you are going to do in order to gain love and avoid pain. You've already learned about the reward-punishment system, and now you do your utmost to make sure that you're starting to understand how do you win in life, how do you gain love, how do you get your way, and you start forming your own particular way of moving through the world. You start forming your beliefs around the world, you start forming your beliefs around yourself and what you should do in order to gain pleasure and avoid pain. And this is how the psychology is formed. And unfortunately, what happens is because this paradigm is based in a very, very early age of association without reason, then what happens is as we get older, we start to form on top of that psychology further beliefs about ourselves as we are going through puberty and as we're going through adolescence and we're becoming teenagers. And as a teenager, the identity is now forming and teenagers trying to form their own place in the world. And we've all been through this process if you're an adult. And you understand, if you look back at your teenage years, some of the most important years of your life when you made some important distinctions about who you are and how you were going to operate in the world. And then on top of that, you've got the fears that are being projected from your parents. Don't do that. Don't go there. Don't speak to strangers. Don't, art. You really want to do art? I mean, are you going to make any money in art? Perhaps you should do law. And they start enforcing and start projecting their own ideas of reality onto children. And as we do, we form our own psychology. We take a little bit from our parents. We take a little bit from our environments, from our grandparents, from our older siblings, from anybody who impresses us when we're young. Being so influential and so impressionable when we're young, we look up at the people around us that we hold in the highest esteem. Our parents, our older siblings, our grandparents, our teachers. And slowly we start to take on some of their definitions of reality. We don't realize it, but unconsciously we are absorbing the world around us and we are forming our own model of the world. Because we are trained either consciously or unconsciously by the environments that we find ourselves in, we now are forming a false definition of reality that is based largely in a fear-based consciousness. Think about that for a second. For the most part, everyone is walking around with a psychology that was formed in a fear-based consciousness for the most part. It's no wonder that most people are negative. It's no wonder that most people are critical. Because if we look at the environments that we continue to live into as adults, if we look at the news, if we look at the world at large, if we look at the news channels that are broadcasting 24/7, constantly negative news, CNN. And that's what it's all about. And so we then find ourselves in environments where now we're working with teams of people. We get into the working world and we find ourselves working with other people and everybody's bringing their own paradigm to work. Everyone brings their own consciousness to the environment they're working in. And everyone's bringing their own filter of the world. And then you have people who have no idea of what's happening in their own mind. All they know is that they're frustrated, they're nervous, they're fearful, they're anxious, they're stressed, they're shy, they don't like strangers, or they don't find themselves operate effectively in large groups. And you've got all this going on in the unconscious. These false definitions of reality that get in the way of us being effective, successful, happy, and fulfilled. And really, through 29 years of study, it's my firm belief and my conviction that the only reason that we are here is to actually be happy and enjoy life. I mean, what a concept. I mean, life shouldn't be difficult. Life should be easy. Life is about being happy. And we can only succeed at the highest level when we are happily doing so. Most people have got it the wrong way around. And what they're doing is they're succeeding to be happy. I was one of those people for many years. I thought that my happiness was in the future somewhere. That when I got to a certain point and I felt successful, when I had achieved a certain goal, then I would be happy. Then it would be much better. Then I'd feel better about myself. Then I'd be more acceptable. Then I'd be more loved. And then you get there and you realize that nothing's really changed. You still feel the same way. You've achieved the goal, yet you still feel frustrated. You've achieved the goal, yet you still feel, unhappy. You say, well, what's that about? It's no wonder that most people in the world, when they get to a goal in their life and they've achieved a certain amount of money, and they think, well, I've got the money now, and yet I'm still not happy. I mean, look at everybody who's achieved celebrity and fame. And you look at the list of those people who are famous, adored, celebrity status, and rich. Everybody knows their name. And yet you look at the list of those people that have actually taken their own lives in spite of their fame, in spite of their money, in spite of the adoration of millions of followers around the world. Why would someone take their own life when they've got everything that everyone else wants? The only reason that someone would take their own life when they've got everything, or then it looks like they've got everything they want. They've got the freedom, the time, the money, they can do whatever they want, whenever they want to, with whoever they want to do it with, and yet they still take their own life. The only reason somebody does that is because they are unhappy in themselves. In other words, they've got a false definition of reality that it doesn't matter how successful they look, how much money they have, they still can't find the means to feel happy within themselves. They've achieved, but they have no fulfillment, and you need both. You need to be able to be fulfilled, and you need to be able to achieve. In other words, you need to happily achieve. There's no sense in just achieving without a fulfillment. You see, achieving is a science. We all know how to achieve, and yet fulfillment is an art. And that's why so few people have really learned how to be fulfilled, learned how to be happy. And the key really is to be happy no matter what's showing up in your world. The key is to be happy no matter what's happening, no matter what challenges you might be facing. And that comes from a unique definition of reality that tells you that you can say to yourself, no matter what's going on around me, I am in control of how I feel at any time. And so I've come up with this 3-step process that I've used on myself over the last 18 years. And let me tell you a little bit about myself a little bit more. I introduced myself earlier, but what I didn't tell you is that I grew up in a very tough neighborhood in South Africa when I was young. The first 6 years of my life, I lived right next door to a police station. And what I saw in the police yard next door, by climbing on the wall and looking through a gap that no one else knew existed, what I saw there was brutal. And what it taught me is that human beings are really mean to each other. And I was only 4.5 years of age when I saw this for the first time, but I literally watched a man get beaten to death, and I was 4.5. I didn't tell anybody about that experience, but I began to watch that on a regular basis. And then when I was about the age of 6.5, we moved away from that area. Much later on, after many years of being bullied at school with very low self-esteem, I went to the army. I became a soldier for the South African Defence Force. I got trained in many different disciplines. And then in 1987, I was sent with a force of 6,000 troops into Angola on a top secret mission. According to the government at that time, nobody knew we were up there. We weren't supposed to be up there. It was against the Geneva Convention at the time. And we went to war for 7 months. And during that 7-month period, I lost lots of friends who were killed next to me. One of my friends was killed and died while I gave him a blood transfusion. And after 7 months of that experience, coming home, trying to process what I'd been through, suffering with post-traumatic stress, I was very angry, I was volatile, I was emotional, and I had mood swings, and I began to have nightmares. And I had nightmares for about 7 years thereafter. And what I did is I began to get unconscious on a daily basis because I was suffering and I wanted to take myself out of pain. So I learned to anesthetize myself. I learned to get unconscious on a daily basis so I wouldn't have nightmares. I began to drink heavily. I began to use drugs. And it was at that time, as I told you earlier, somebody put in my hands Think and Grow Rich, which was the door that was open for me at 21 years of age and led me through a new doorway into the world of personal and psychological development. And I fell in love with the information. 29 years later now, I've worked with thousands of people over the last 17 years, running my own programs, running my own workshops, coaching people. I've worked with ex-military personnel. I've worked with people at the highest level in business. I've worked with corporate organizations, big teams in big companies. I've worked with small, medium, and large enterprises. I've worked with sportsmen and sportswomen. I've worked with children who are addicted to cocaine. I've worked with women who have been raped. And I can tell you the same thing is the same, and it's true for everyone. We all have the challenges we have because we haven't learned, or we haven't been taught to use our mind in the right way. We haven't been taught to use this fantastic piece of equipment, the brain, the nervous system, and the mind effectively. And we have three minds essentially. We've got the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and the superconscious, which connects us to everything around us. If our conscious mind is critical, then we can't be creative. And if we can't be creative, we can't use the unconscious mind effectively to support us in the pursuit of our dreams. And then if our unconscious and our conscious mind are not working effectively in our favor, in other words, the unconscious will continually digest and chew whatever the conscious mind is focusing on. If the conscious mind is focusing on critical, on what's missing, on judgment, and what's going wrong, then what happens is the unconscious chews that constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And now we lose our clean and pure connection to the superconscious around us, the magic around us, which means our ability to manifest our dreams is diminished and undermined. So we need to use three of these minds together effectively so they all align. We've got to take the critic out of our mind. We've got to subdue that critic. We've got to silence that critic. How do we do that? I'm going to explain with a 3-step formula. But once we silence the critic, we can now bring the creative mind back to life. We can now bring the magician back to life, bring the imagination back to life. As Einstein once said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge will take you from A to B. Imagination will take you right around the world. So we got to start reintroducing the creative mind back to life. Bring the creative mind back to life and feed the creative mind, and then start using the unconscious mind effectively. So the unconscious mind now begins to support the creative mind, starts to support the vision you have in your mind, starts to build and work on the vision that you put in your mind with your creative imagination. And then you start to clean up your connection to the superconscious. And then magic starts to unfold. And this is the process of alchemy. This is the process of the law of attraction. The law of attraction states that whatever we hold in our mind with emotional intensity and desire and breathe life into, exactly what Napoleon Hill said in his classic Think and Grow Rich, whatever you hold in your mind with desire and emotional intensity, and you allow your unconscious to work on in the background, and you commit and believe and buy into this idea that you connected to everything and that we live in this cosmic soup, and you align those three minds, and slowly what happens is you start to see magic unfolding. And the more you believe it, the more you'll see it. And as you gain momentum and you continue to work on that mind, that conscious mind that wants to always be in the criticizing side of life, what's missing, what's going wrong, us versus them, me versus them, right versus wrong, good versus bad. That same model you learned when you were young. Reward, punishment. You're a good kid, you get this. You're a bad kid, you sit on the naughty step. That ego mind that always wants to look for what's missing, always wants to be right, always wants to keep you safe. When you can silence that and then start being creative and bring the other two minds into play, the unconscious. And remember, your unconscious mind is your partner in success. It wants to help you to manifest your dreams. And then you have the superconscious, which then starts to provide the opportunities, the synchronicities, the coincidences, starts putting people in your path, the right people, the right connections, the right book show up, the right training shows up, the right phone call comes through, the email comes through. Suddenly the magic starts unfolding. This is what life's really about. And when you get into this side of things and you start feeling happy and you start enjoying the process, and remember, throughout this process, you still encounter challenges. But those 3% of people that achieve their dreams, what they do is they've learned to process their significant emotional events effectively. They've learned to turn their adversity into profit. They've learned to profit through their adversity. That's what I've learned over the last 29 years. And over the last 18 years especially, that I've been practicing this daily on myself. What I've learned is I've learned to turn my own adversity into profit. I learned to turn my youth, those experiences in my youth, those significant emotional events that caused me so much pain, all that bullying that helped to form such a low self-esteem, those brutal experiences that I saw in the police yard next door. I lost one of my best friends at 14 who committed suicide. I couldn't understand it at the time. I've had a lot of friends who have committed suicide since, going to war in Angola. That experience was painful at the time, and I was extremely angry and volatile. However, through all this training, what I learned to do is I learned to slowly turn that adversity into profit. I began to ask different questions. I started looking for the gift. And now I'm happy to say that I'm happier than I've ever been. I'm happy in my skin. And I look at that experience in Angola as a gift because it taught me about compassion, love, energy. If without that experience, I would never have studied what I've studied up until this day. I would never be on this path. So everything has a reason. Everything is a gift. And what we need to do is we need to learn to manage the conscious mind, especially the critic that lives in our conscious mind. Remember, it was nurtured through experience, through association, through projection of fear from the elders around you when you were young, through the experiences of other people as you grew up. Be careful, don't go there, don't talk to those people. The English are like this, the French are like this, the Russians are like this, the Americans are like this, the Muslims are like this, etc. You get the drift. And through all this projection of fear and fear-based consciousness and limiting beliefs, the people around us, the people that influence us the most when we're young, we don't understand it, we don't know at the time, but we take on our mother's belief system. We take on our father's belief system. It's not even our own belief system. Think about it. Have you ever sat down and just said to yourself, what do I really believe about life? What do I believe about money? What do I believe about success? What do I believe about love, about passion, about the world, about the economy? What do I believe? What are the beliefs you hold in your mind? Are they serving you, pulling you forward into the future you would love to create? Or are they holding you back from the future that you would love to create? Because beliefs carry consequences, and your paradigm is full of beliefs. A paradigm is a collection of beliefs. And then you've learned to value certain things and avoid certain things. And you've developed your own rules about the world that you live in. What should happen in order for you to feel happy? What should happen in order for you to feel peace? What should happen in order for you to feel successful? The problem is if you don't meet those rules, or if those rules aren't met, that means that your success is always in the future. So we got to look at that and we say, well, how can we change it? How can we change it? Easily, my friends. Change happens in a moment. Change doesn't take a long time, as traditional counseling or conventional counseling or therapy would have you believe. Change happens in an instant. When you can change how you look at something, then the thing that you're looking at literally changes. I'll never forget the first time I heard that. Wayne Dyer said that. The first time I ever heard that, it was Wayne Dyer who mentioned it. He said, when you change the way you're looking at something, the thing you are looking at will change right in front of your eyes. And it's absolutely true. So my 3-step formula is about helping you to change the way you're looking at something and then create new choices for yourself so that you can start to feel the way you want to feel, and you can start to focus on what you really want to focus on, and you can then manage the way you respond and show up in the world no matter what's going on around you. My goal for you is for you to find a place in yourself that is always at peace, for you to find a place in yourself that is always happy, for you to find a place in yourself that is always in love. That place exists within you, and what separates us from that truth is the ego mind. The mind that is based in criticism, the ego mind that always wants to be right, that always is creating the illusion of separation from the world around us and from the people around us. The ego mind that's always looking for right versus wrong, good versus bad. And so when we can understand that and we can start to choose the way we respond, what it does then is it opens up a unique world of choice. So the first step in this process, number 1, awareness. Awareness. You may have heard the phrase that the first step to changing anything is awareness, and it's absolutely true. Until you know something, then you don't really know what to work on. We don't know what we don't know. And until we know what we don't know, then we'll never really know what to work on. So if you can start being aware of what you're thinking, you've already taken a massive step towards your total freedom. So start listening to what's going on inside your head. I always tell my clients and the audiences I speak to, I say, listen to what's going on in your head. What is the voice in your head saying right now? Think about it right now as you're watching me in this webinar. What is the voice in your head saying right now? Perhaps it's saying something like, wow, this makes sense. Or, oh, I don't agree with that. Or maybe you're thinking about what you should do tomorrow while you're watching me. Or perhaps for a split second, your mind went to what you should have done today. The mind is always being distracted all the time. And our goal is to keep bringing it back to the present moment. And awareness helps you to do that. Because when you're aware, you can pay attention and you can listen. And when you listen, you're going to hear what's really going on. And when you hear what's really going on, at first, you may be shocked. At first, it's going to probably freak you out a little bit, but that's okay, because once you can start hearing, you can start differentiating. Now you can start choosing. So awareness is key, number one. Listen to what's going on up here. I always tell people, listen, get conscious. What are you saying to yourself? What are you focusing on? Think about focus. The word focus, it means follow one course until successful. How difficult is it for the conscious mind, the critical conscious mind, to follow one thought process until successful? Very difficult for most people because it's always distracted. And therefore we have the monkey mind. The monkey mind's all over the place. It's just thoughts, boom, 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 boom. According to who you listen to, doesn't matter which teacher you listen to, they've all got their own version of this, but it's somewhere between 60 to 90,000 thoughts. 60 to 90,000 thoughts flowing through your mind every 24 hours. Think about that. Deepak Chopra says, the great doctor Deepak Chopra, you may have heard him, he says somewhere underneath that 60 to 90,000 thoughts, there's silence. And that's where you want to get to. You want to get to the silence underneath the thoughts. And you can only do that when you start paying attention, you start becoming aware. When you pay attention, you become aware, you start listening, and you say, gosh, there's a thought. Oh, I don't know if I like that thought. And you start noticing. How many times have you argued with yourself? I bet you found yourself at some point in your life. You can probably relate to this, just like I've done many times myself. You find yourself in your head arguing with yourself about something. Should you do it? Shouldn't you do it? When should you do it? Worse still, how many times have you argued with another person in your head? They're not even in the same room as you. They're not even in the same country as you, perhaps. Maybe they're on the other side of the world and you're arguing with yourself, or you're arguing with them about something. How many times have you found yourself arguing with your spouse in your own mind? They're not in the same room, but you're arguing with them. So this is the mind always playing tricks on us, the monkey mind, jumping around thought to thought to thought, random thoughts entering your consciousness all the time, 60 to 90,000 every 24 hours. The key is to become aware and listen. Then you can choose whether you want to entertain a thought like that. Remember, most of your thoughts are not even your own thoughts. Think about that. You've got this data sphere where you've got all this data flowing all the time. Information flowing all the time. You can't see it, but it's flowing all the time in the form of energy. You put up a radio aerial, you tune into a certain frequency, you pick up a radio. That's radio waves. Those are not the only waves. So you've got all this data flowing. Your mind is going to pick it up because you've got a little antenna sticking out of the top of your head. We've all got one. And we are constantly transmitting. We are sending and receiving thought all day long. So a thought pops into your mind, you get triggered, the ego mind goes to work straight away, it starts to notice what's missing, it starts to judge the situation, it's looking for the good versus the wrong, the bad versus the wrong, the right, etc. And now suddenly you get triggered and now you're feeling frustrated, now you're into a state of fear, what may go wrong, what's missing, immediately your mind's all over the place, and when your mind is stressed, you've lost your ability to feel peaceful and calm. When the mind is stressed, the heart is closed. Very important to remember that because the heart is a feeling organ. The mind is a judgment center because it's always trying to judge what means pain, what means pleasure. And because you've learned early on that you should avoid certain things because they mean pain, remember these false definitions of reality that cause pain? Remember early on, you learned very early on when you were young, that means pain, don't go there. Let me go here, this is safe. And because we love feeling safe, we look for that throughout our lives. So that mind is always looking for that. The problem is that if you're stressed, your heart closes, your heart can't work properly, and you can't really process the emotions effectively, and you find yourself in a disempowering emotion. So step one, awareness. Start paying attention. Start listening to yourself. From the time you wake up in the morning, listen to your thoughts. Don't get hooked by the ego and start fighting with yourself. Don't beat yourself up when you notice yourself thinking something negative. Just notice it and say, isn't that interesting? There's a thought. It's not a positive thought, it's a negative thought. Perhaps it's based in frustration or something like that, or it's about something that's missing. Don't get hooked by it. Just notice and say, what do I believe about this? What is this thought triggering in me? What belief does it trigger? What emotion does it trigger? Where's my focus going with this thought? And then once you have that awareness, once you can practice that awareness, what it does is it really wakes you up to what's going on inside your head. Remember, this is where you live. This is where you live. And when you wake yourself up to what's going on inside your head, now you've got awareness. Now you can start saying after awareness. And remember, the ego mind, what does the ego mind do? The ego mind says, I am upset because you didn't phone me. You didn't arrive on time. You didn't send me flowers. You didn't tell me you loved me. You left me there, etc., etc., etc. You fill in the blank. I am upset because. This is the ego mind. The authentic self, which is the magician, the other part of us, remember the critic lives here, the magician lives here, and the authentic self says, ego mind, I know that you feel vindicated, I know you feel justified in your upset. However, we both know that we have the responsibility. We are therefore able to respond to whatever shows up. Therefore, we can respond in any way we choose. So imagine if you had the ability to respond in any way you choose to any external stimulus, then why do we automatically go to frustration, anger, overwhelm, depression, fear, stress, apathy, lethargy, shame, guilt? These are the disempowering negative emotions that are at play in the world at large on a day-to-day basis every single day around the world. Just put your TV on, have a look. You'll see these emotions playing out in the world, all over the world. These are the emotions that cause us to kill each other. These are the emotions that cause people to have depression. These are the emotions that cause suicide to keep rising every year in every age group. We need to pay attention. And whenever we feel ourselves in these disempowering emotions, we need to say, how would I like to respond now to this external stimulus? Once you're aware of how you're being stimulated internally by an external stimulus, you can now choose, do I want to be triggered by this? Or do I want to respond differently? We can always respond differently. Always. I don't care what anybody says. I'm telling you now, through 18 years of practicing this on myself, from somebody who 20 years ago was angry, somebody who was volatile, somebody who was frustrated, somebody who was always pissed off and always complaining and always noticing what was missing and always broke and always unhappy. Through years and years of practicing this and paying attention, I've now arrived at a place where I can literally choose my response moment to moment. More importantly, and I want you to understand this, nobody becomes a saint. I still make mistakes. I still catch myself being hooked by my ego mind. I still notice myself being triggered, but I'm just much quicker now through paying attention and being aware. I'm so much quicker at getting off. I get hooked, I get off. And I get off much quicker. I can do it in seconds now. I'll give you an example. I was on an aeroplane the other day and I was trying to get some sleep. It was a 4-hour flight. And within taking off, a few minutes after taking off, I was just getting into my hypnosis. I had my earphones on and I was just drifting off nicely, and boom, there my chair got knocked. And obviously it felt like someone kicked my chair. So I sat back again, I relaxed, and I started drifting off again, and there again, a knock on the back of my chair. This continued through the entire flight of 4 hours. Needless to say, I was feeling frustrated, I was very unhappy, but I just kept noticing that, and I just kept saying, I'm getting frustrated, I'm getting unhappy, I'm getting stressed here. There was a kid behind me, about a 12-year-old kid, who kept bumping my seat. He had ants in his pants, he couldn't sit still, he was sitting with his mother. Eventually I turned around and I said, please young man, please, you're kicking my seat. He didn't understand me, he was Russian, but I informed him, and he could see, I suppose, he could see the frustration on my face. I informed him as best I could that he was disturbing my peace of mind. However, I knew that it wasn't him that was disturbing my peace of mind. I knew it was my reaction to his action. I want you to understand this now. I was reacting to his action. Sure enough, he was kicking my chair, but I still have the power to choose my response. And I kept noticing myself getting hooked, and I kept saying to myself, it's okay. What can I focus on now? What can I focus on apart from the fact that I'm being disturbed by somebody behind me? And I kept bringing myself back to the moment, kept getting centered, kept getting present, and kept asking myself the question, what can I be grateful for right now? I could be grateful for the fact that even though my chair is being bumped every so often periodically, I'm still sitting comfortably on an airplane, and I'm on my way to Moscow, and I'm listening to a nice meditation, and I can still focus on that and still alleviate or diminish the frustration by choosing the response in the moment. Doesn't matter what's happening around us, we can always respond in the way we choose if we empower ourselves to do so and we recognize we have that freedom. And once you can do that, now you can combine awareness and then responsibility. Awareness of what's really going on inside your head and listening to yourself and noticing when you're focusing on what's missing, or when you are frustrated or angry or depressed or unhappy, and saying what's really going on. What am I believing right now about the situation? What am I making the situation mean? What's triggering me? What's really going on? And then once I understand, what's the response that I want to choose right now? How do I want to respond? Remember, I have the ability to respond in any way I choose. And I can respond peacefully, I can respond compassionately, I can respond happily. I don't have to be angry. I can choose a different response. Remember, anger is also a choice, except we've practiced it over and over and over. I had practiced my anger for years, since I was a young boy, and I was frustrated and I was, bullied from a young age, from the age of 6. And I was frustrated and unhappy. I was angry, and I was trying to exert my own influence in my own world. I was craving attention, and I practiced that particular emotional response throughout my life because I knew that if I was angry, people would pay attention. But then I got to the point where I was aware of that, and I thought, you know what, I don't want to feel like that anymore. I want to feel happy. I want to feel effective. I want to be effective. I want to feel like I have the ability to turn things around. I want to be a leader. I want to be somebody who's effective and making a difference in my own life. Somebody who is navigating my own life so that I can feel in control. And so that I began to pay attention, and I started noticing, oh gosh, I'm always angry. And I always had these beliefs that showed up when I was angry. I was angry because that people had done something to me, and I felt justified. And my ego mind was running the show. And then I began to choose a different response. And I thought, well, how else could I respond right now? And I thought, well, if I'm choosing to be angry, then what's stopping me from choosing to be happy right now? Even though there's an external stimulus that's triggering this disturbance internally. And I began to practice that over and over. I said, I can choose to feel peaceful now. I can choose to be happy now. I can choose to control what's going on inside of me. It's the meaning we give it that always makes the biggest impact. It reminds me of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read it, you must read it. It's his documentation of his time in a Nazi concentration camp during the war. And he noticed when he looked around that the strongest people physically, the physical strong people, I'm talking physically strong, the men who were physically strong, seemed to die the fastest. They were physically strong, but they were mentally weak. They were not able to provide an empowering meaning to their current experience. And so what they did is they gave up, they lost hope, and they died. Viktor Frankl noticed that the weakest people, some of the weakest people in terms of physically weak or frail, some of those people survived the most treacherous, the most torturous, the most dire circumstances in a Nazi concentration camp, and yet they survived. Why? Because they attached an empowering meaning to the experience that allowed them to live through it. They said, there's a reason I must stay alive. There's a reason for this. There's a meaning, an empowering meaning for this experience. Even if it was just to tell other people about it. At some point, some people said, I must live through this because I must educate people on what's going on here so this never happens again. Whatever your meaning is, it will determine your experience. So you've got awareness, then you have the ability to choose your response to whatever's showing up around you, and then you have your choice, your choices. When you can choose your response, then you've got more choices. Because when you choose your response from a conscious, empowering place, more choices show up. The more choices you have, the more freedom you feel. The more freedom you feel, the more empowered you feel. So you've got ARC, awareness, responsibility, choice. These 3 simple steps. And when I say simple, they're simple because it's a case of doing certain things after the step before. You have steps in a strategy. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. However how many steps you have in a strategy. It's not easy, even though it's simple, because the critical mind, the ego mind, will trick you. It'll trick you into feeling justified. It'll say to you, but I'm allowed to feel angry. It's my right to feel angry. I'll apologize when they apologize to me. Right? And we take that stance in our lives all the time. And what we don't realize is when we take that kind of a stance, the cost of that stance, the cost of being right is love. The cost of being right is peace. The cost of being right is empowered. The cost of being right is effective. You lose the ability to be effective, empowered, in love, compassionate, understanding, peaceful, relaxed, chilled when you are being right. And so when we can be aware of how we are fixated on being right, and we can be aware of how the critical mind is playing tricks on us all the time, always looking to hook us, always looking to focus on what's missing, always trying to keep us safe and comfortable. And then we can be aware of it. You can say, I see you there. Thank you for sharing. I understand you there, and I know that you are determined to keep me safe, but it's okay. I know that you're determined to help me to focus on what's missing. I know you're determined to help me to judge the situation and see, and you're determined on the illusion of separation. Thank you. I know that you're there trying to keep me safe. However, this is not the truth. This is not what I want to believe. The truth is that I can feel calm right now. The truth is that I can feel empowered right now, no matter what's going on. The truth is that I have the ability to respond in any way I choose. And then the more you start doing that, the more choice you have. The more choice you have, the more freedom you have. The more freedom you have, the more empowered you are. This is the way to move through life, my friends. Because as I said, we've got achievement and we've got fulfillment, and you've got to have both. If you achieve, and it's all about goals and the physical plane and achieving, then you're going to get to a place in your life when you're going to suddenly realize what most people have realized who have got to this place. I've got the money, I've got everything I wanted, but I'm still not happy. The same thing happened to me. I got to a place in my life, it was around 2004. I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life before. I was living a millionaire lifestyle. I was living in a beautiful house. It was worth millions of rands. I was looking over the sea, at a beautiful sea, 180-degree sea view, 2 cars in the garage, a beautiful office under my house, big garden, swimming pool, playing golf 3 times a week, making lots of money, speaking, training, getting flown all around the country, working with the biggest brands in the country. I'm talking about in South Africa at that time. And one of the highest paid speakers and one of the most successful trainers in the country at that time. One of the founders of the Professional Speaking Association of Southern Africa. Before it was called the PSASA, it was first the National Speaking Association of Southern Africa. And I was one of those founders, and I was doing extremely well. And I got to the top of my mountain. I ticked off all the goals that I wanted to achieve. 4 years before that, I wrote down everything I wanted to achieve, and I ticked all those boxes off, and I was at the top of my mountain. I was living the life of my dreams, and I still wasn't happy. I couldn't sleep at night. Something was bugging me. Something was missing. Something didn't seem right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something was missing. And this is the same for everyone who gets to that point, who hasn't focused on both sides of the equation, who's only focused on the achievement and forgotten about the fulfillment. I'd forgotten about the fulfillment. I was always about the achievement. I thought that money would make me happy. I thought that money would make me more acceptable. I thought that money would make me more attractive to other people, that money would bring me love, that money would bring me acceptance. I thought that when I finally got to that point where I was making that kind of money, I'd be happy. And then I got there and I still wasn't happy, because somewhere inside of me, I felt that I didn't really deserve my success. As a result of that, I made a bad decision. One bad decision led to another bad decision. And before I knew it, I was out of control and I slid all the way down the other side of my mountain. When I got to the bottom, I felt worse than before I started climbing that mountain several years before, because now I had tasted success. Now I had tasted financial freedom. Now I knew what it was like to live the millionaire life, and I'd lost it. And that was my thinking. I'd lost it. I had self-destructed. I had self-sabotaged, and I would tell myself that, and I would give myself a hard time. And I couldn't understand how I'd done it for a while. And then I went to work again. I went back to work, went back to the basics, back to doing the same things I'm telling you about, went back to listening, back to asking different questions, back to contemplation, back to deep thinking, back to meditation. And I realized that money would never make me happy. And several years later, now since that experience, that is now, it's 2017 now, in 2010 was when I was at my worst. I was really down and out again, had lost everything. And it was 2 years that I was in a hole, feeling like a victim. And eventually I just thought I got to get back on the horse. And in 2012, I climbed out of that victim mentality and I began to get back to work. I got back to the basics and I began to start listening again. I began to become aware again. I started to take responsibility again. And I started to create more choices for myself. 5 years later now, I can tell you that this process, I've taught it to many people. I teach this in a program. I teach it to my coaching clients. I speak about it in all my keynote presentations around the world. I'm currently on a tour right around the world. I visit countries all the time, and I'm always talking about this specific experience of the mind and how your mind will trick you, and it is tricking you all day long. And the only way that you can understand it is by paying attention, becoming aware, and then knowing that you have the ability to choose a different response in any instance, in any circumstance, even if your world is falling down. And then you can create more choices for yourself. So I love this subject and I speak about it all around the world, and I deliver this in a 3-day program. It's called The Way Back to Love. If you've been interested in what I've shared with you, if you've enjoyed it, if you found some answers in what I've been saying, if it's triggered some thinking in you, if you've had some deep insights and you want to take those further, if you want to take what you've heard here further and you want to join me and learn more about this at a deeper level and actually practice what I've been talking about here and practice and get it into your nervous system and get it into your understanding, into your psychology, so you start using it effectively in your own life, then I want to invite you onto a program that I have called The Way Back to Love. It's a 3-day program that I'm extremely proud of. It creates massive transformation. The feedback from this program has been amazing from everyone who's attended it. And I run these programs usually 2 or 3 times a year. I've got some dates coming up in the new year, in 2018. I've got some programs that, this program, the dates are coming up in the new year, and I've got some specific price points for it. I've got some offers that are associated to the program. So you can find out all about the offer. You can find out about the dates. The next available date is on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th of March 2018. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a full 3-day program. It's very interactive. It's very enjoyable. It's very deep. You will love it. You will learn more about your own false definitions of reality. You will understand exactly how you formed your own consciousness. You will understand exactly how you formed your belief systems. You will understand exactly what's in your way or what you are afraid of at a deep level. You'll understand it for the first time in your life. You'll understand exactly how you can get out of your own way, and you'll understand exactly what you can do day to day to begin to create a new definition reality that allows you to be free, empowered, and in charge of your life. If you want to join me on this program, please do. You will absolutely love it. Guaranteed satisfaction. 2nd, 3rd, 4th of March. As I said, check out the link that is associated, or the link on this webinar. There's a link for you here. You go to the link, you can find out all about the different price points. There are offers available, so take advantage of the offers, because the closer we get to the date, the more expensive the ticket becomes. And you don't want to miss this program. It will change your life, guaranteed. At some point, I look forward to seeing you on the program. I hope it's sooner rather than later. Thank you for listening. I trust you've enjoyed this webinar. If you have, please share it with the people you love. You never know whose life you might save. Thank you. Stay blessed. And remember, everything is always on the way. Nothing is ever in the way. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you soon.